Welcome, everyone, to Rock M Radio. Yes, it's another brand new episode of our interview series. Yes, I am wearing the same T-shirt as the last time. If you watched that, that's because I did these in the same day. A little behind-the-scenes fun. The big news going around is all this realignment stuff. We just talked to CJ Moore. If you haven't listened to that already, there should be a link in the description below to go lead you to that discussion. It was a really good one with CJ. But next up, we have the OG, Bill Connelly. Anybody who doesn't know Bill, if you're reading Rock M Nation or listening to any of these podcasts, I'll be surprised. But just in case, Bill is the founder of rockmnation.com. He used to blog about Missouri sports years and years ago. He has since left Rock M Nation, if you didn't know that as well, and he's writing for ESPN. So without any further ado, let's go talk to Bill. Welcome, everyone. I'd like to bring in the OG, the Godfather of Rock M Nation, the original, the builder, now writing words for ESPN, the one, the only, Bill Connelly, at ESPN_Bill C on Twitter. Bill, always a pleasure to talk to you. How are you doing, my man?
I'm doing well. How about you? It's a cloudy day outside, but yeah, I still get to live in Columbia, Missouri, so no complaints.
Yeah, I think we're gonna get some rain here. It is Wednesday for Bill and I. I don't know when anybody else is going to be watching this, probably on Thursday or maybe Friday. But Bill, we're going to talk about college football. I know a lot of people may not associate me with a college football expert. I don't claim to be one, but I do think you are at least as close to being a college football expert as there is. So I thought it'd be good to talk to you about this conference realignment stuff. I think this most recent spat of news came as a little bit of a surprise to a lot of people. It seems like there's a normal sort of cycle to the realignment stuff, and it seems like August is maybe not the best time for it. But that didn't stop the Pac-12, the Big Ten, the Big 12 from making all kinds of news last week. I think the first sort of break was Colorado announcing they were going back to the Big 12. That sort of caused a panic amongst other Pac-12 schools. And now it looks like Pac-12, which is one of the oldest conferences in the country, could be toast. It's down to 4 teams. What is your take on the future of the Pac-12?
Well, there's no way it's not toast. I mean, even if they, I know Pete Thamel, one of the things that he's been writing about in his daily realignment tickers that he has to write now, is talking about like maybe the 4 leftovers can rope in some Texas schools and get by, and then once next year is done and they can grab Mountain West schools, they can do all this. I don't see that. I don't see that happen, and I don't see, if they do that, why it would really end up with an entity all that much more valuable than the Mountain West is to begin with. So I don't see that happening, and I don't see the Pac-12 surviving, not only because this happened, but because of when it happened. They can't go they had to pay like $34 million per Mountain West school to enter their conference next year. And that's, where's that money coming from? Cal's already broke. And then, you don't have a deal. You don't have any sort of media revenue coming in. So it's a bad deal. It's a bad deal all around. I do think, by the way, you were talking about the timing of all this. We have transfer portal windows. There should be a realignment portal window as well, where, if you haven't announced you're leaving by next year, by like May, then we don't talk about this again until next May, because doing this in early August with actual preview stuff to talk about is just rude. And everybody, I'd like to have words with everybody who did this at all, but then also who did this right now. It's been a hectic time here.
Well, yeah, even Eli Drinkwitz had some sort of choice words, for the people in charge, sort of making these decisions now, and I think there is a lot to say about that, because I don't listen to like a whole lot of college football podcasts. One of the college basketball podcasts that I try to listen to with some frequency is the one with Gary Parrish and Matt Norlander, and they had a college football analyst on, and he was sort of talking about the same thing. Like he wants to be, in conference preview mode and previewing teams and previewing players and looking at schedules and all these sorts of things. And instead, what we're talking about is something that's going to impact the sport next year and for the foreseeable future. But it's not going to impact anything this season. But it's still such big news that you don't really have a choice not to talk about it. Like, how do you ignore the fact that the Pac-12 is down to 4 teams and Stanford, one of the really most storied college programs overall, is looking like they're without a home, and Cal has its own sort of proud tradition. And, I've always sort of thought that there was at least a group of power conference schools that just sort of got lucky at the right time, years and years and years ago.
A lot of them, yeah.
And Washington State and Oregon State are probably amongst those schools that have never really had like deep pockets to really compete at the highest levels of college football. But they seem to me like they'd be a really good fit in the Mountain West. But like Stanford, are we really talking about Stanford as a possible Mountain West school?
I mean, I think, well, first of all, like as far as,
or the ACC.
Well, I mean, yes, that's on the table. No, I mean, you could say Oregon State and Washington State, they were always kind of connected to much bigger schools that were pulling in much bigger revenue, and they were kind of, getting some of that. So maybe they were lucky in that sense. They were also extremely unlucky in this specific round, just in that, like, Colorado, I mean, has literally been good at football once in 17 seasons. And they got to be basically like the start of the final crumble of the Pac-12 because they're in Colorado, not in Oregon or Washington. Arizona has been an absolute nightmare for most of the last 5 years in football. And they were the second ones aboard. And basically, as this all started to fall apart, you could tell Oregon State and Washington State are going to get absolutely screwed here, even though they've been definitively better at the only sport that matters in realignment over the last few years. So that's, that just kind of stinks. But I mean, they certainly, I'm not going to say they're going to be better off in the Mountain West, because when you're making whatever it'll end up being, $20 million or whatever less a year in media rights, that's never going to be better off. But now you can say they can move to the Mountain West next year, maybe make the college football playoff, jump right in there and win the Mountain West and maybe steal a bid. And that'd be kind of a funny, way everything came around, especially if like Oregon and Washington go 8-4 in the new Big Ten and Oregon State makes the playoff. There'd be certainly some humor that we would all take in that. But
that's a poetic.
But overall, they got screwed, and it's really hard to see that they have any other major options right now. Cal and Stanford, you're right. They do. Now that we have officially broken geography, nothing matters. We can put them in the Atlantic Coast Conference, sure. I think the depressing part about the last week is this really did. I know I'm not the only one, but this had nothing to do with Missouri. It had nothing to do with really all that many teams that would be competing for the national title all that much, except for occasionally Oregon or Washington. The finality of everything, we've broken geography. We have broken West Coast football, and there's really never going to be any putting it back together. When OU and Texas come to the SEC, we're going to actually we're going to be breaking some rivalries and like bedlam among them, and Texas versus Baylor and Tech and the other Texas schools, all that. But we'll at least be kind of gluing some back together too. We'll get Texas versus A&M. We'll get what OU and Missouri. I didn't realize how much I missed OU Mizzou until like the thought of it coming back, because I grew up in Oklahoma. That one always had kind of special resonance for me overall. So we at least Texas, Arkansas, we at least get some of these back while we're breaking some. With the disintegration of the Pac-12, we've done nothing but break rivalries for all time. And Oregon State and Washington State are never going to join the Big Ten. They're never going to be invited. So though the Civil War, the Apple Cup are, as conference rivalries at least, are broken forever. And even when they resume, if they resume as non-conference games, we're now going to be in a world where Oregon's making like $30-40 million or more per year in media rights than Oregon State was. And they already had more money to begin with because, 60 years ago, Phil Knight chose to attend Oregon instead of Oregon State. So it's the finality of it, and the fact that there's really no way to glue this back together in the future, I think is hard to accept, just as a fan and admirer of college sports overall. Like we just broke a lot of stuff. And now, of course, all the, Oregon having to go to Rutgers on a Wednesday night to play volleyball or whatever, however this, goes in the future. We're adding strain, we're adding travel time, we're adding just planes in the air and everything else. And none of that's any good. Congratulations to those who will make more money because of it. But it stinks that we're rooting for spreadsheets now and just hoping our school gets on the right side of that ledger, even if the future isn't a lot of fun.
So the Big Ten has, I have question marks around 10 because it's comical at this point to still refer to it as Big Ten. They haven't been to Big Ten since the 1991. But I think they've arguably been the most aggressive conference when it comes to, how they're expanding and trying to, and probably some of that is trying to kind of combat, the SEC and the SEC kind of moving from a position of strength. And I think, the Big Ten is really kind of trying to counter, but they've been aggressive in those counters. I mean, I don't see how you can look at them adding UCLA and USC as anything other than just being extremely aggressive when there's who's the westernmost, team? Is it Nebraska in the Big Ten? And then you go from Nebraska to
Southern California at that.
Yeah. Southern California, not even close enough to go to the Bay Area, but yeah. So going and bringing these two schools in, what are we thinking the future of the Big Ten is going to look like?
Well, it's funny. I mean, among all other things, it makes a lot more sense to me to bring in 4 Western schools than 2. Because once you kind of schedule things out in your head, you realize, they can play each other. Those 4 teams can play each other every year. And that's one fewer 3 time zone trip they have to make each year. Right. So it actually kind of, in a strange way, it adds to everybody else's travel a hair, but it cuts the Western schools' travel. They were always going to be traveling more than anybody else, and now they have to do they travel slightly less. So that's once you added 2, you might as well add 4 because that's that kind of keeps some more rivalries together, and there are smaller trips. Not that there's anything small about Seattle to Los Angeles, but it's still not Seattle to Piscataway, New Jersey. So, so I don't mind it. And if we were just looking at this, if we took all emotion and history and tradition out of the equation and just looked at what were the biggest brands left that aren't already in the SEC and Big Ten, other than, you can make a case for if Florida State is officially back and they're a top 10 program again, then Clemson and Florida State are that's the best duo on the board. Oregon and Washington was the next best duo. And so, in that sense, in terms of compiling assets, if they were going to expand further, Oregon and Washington was about as good as they were going to do. And 2 good football programs, 2 good fan bases and little pockets of passion and everything. And if we really are kind of going to, if there's just this ship that's going to sail off and it's going to be the new power structure in football, I'm happy that Oregon and Washington get to be a part of that because they deserve it. But you gotta remove a lot of tradition and emotion from the equation to really make that worth it.
Do you think it makes a lot of sense for the Big Ten to essentially split itself into 2 and still have kind of like a divisional conference, like a traditional conference championship game, or possibly split itself into 4s and have a little mini tournament with each, contender at the end of the year?
Well, what they set up for scheduling initially, which I guess now they have to get rid of and start over again since Oregon and Washington are joining. What they set up, I think it was complicated from a schedule making standpoint, but if you're willing to complicate, if you're willing to give somebody in the Big Ten office a bigger headache by having to figure all this out, it made sense what they did in basically setting up the permanent rivals, but you don't have to have three. It really is just kind of, the games that absolutely have to take place every year. Once you've kind of committed to that, I think that's the best way forward, just because, among other things, if we're stopping at 18, like, you're going to have 3 6-team divisions with 2 of the other teams joining the Western teams, or, there's not a clean way to do that. So I think, basically setting it up so that I'm going to assume that the 4 Western schools will all play each other. Those are the 3 permanent rivals for everybody. You rotate everybody else, and you make sure Ohio State or Michigan's still playing Ohio State and Michigan State and all that other stuff. I think that's the way to go. Maybe it results in imbalanced schedules if, depending on who's good at a given time, but the divisional structure always results in imbalanced schedules.
Yeah.
So, I think they seem to have good logic there. It seemed a lot cleaner to me if you just give everybody 3 permanent rivals. But if you really want to take the time to say, okay, well, they only have 2, they only have 1, and they have 3 and all that, that's fine. It'll be, the rotations get weirder, but it still works pretty well.
And then, kind of looking at not just the Big Ten, but, the Big 12 as being, a conference that has gotten, in my opinion, a little bit weird. It's turned itself into a absolute monster of a basketball conference.
Yeah.
But it's still going to be behind the SEC and the Big Ten as far as football is concerned.
As far as football is concerned, yeah. And I think for the Big 12, you really are just basically trying to set yourself up to be the number 3 conference in the country overall. Whether that's football, you can be number 1 in basketball or in this sport or that sport, not baseball or softball, because the SEC is gonna that's an SEC that features Oklahoma softball is just unbelievable. But no, the Big 12, you just added Arizona. Colorado's not bad. Arizona State has its moments. Utah has its moments. But if conference realignment was built solely around basketball brands, then the Big 12 just added one of the best on the board, and they should be pretty excited about that. And they didn't even have to add UConn to do it. They could actually kind of make it still a geographically continuous section over there. So it's funny looking forward. This is a Mizzou podcast. We are Mizzou people and all that. Missouri has committed to being part of the rich and miserable group for the foreseeable future, and the Big 12 gets to be the group with less money and probably and less football success and also more fun. And with my neutral observer hat on, I'm going to love covering the Big 12 moving forward. I hate so many things about how this has all come about, but adding a chaotic Arizona or Arizona State to a chaotic conference, there's going to be so many. Pac-12 After Dark lives, and it'll live in the Big 12, and that's as far as me as a viewer goes, that's a good thing.
So kind of looking now at at where this is going, I think is one of the bigger questions. A lot of people have kind of called it the Endgame. That's what I'm referring to here, straight out of the Avengers. Where is this heading? Because at some point, right, these media rights deals are going to expire. Television overall is shifting. I don't know if you're in the same boat as me. I don't pay for a cable package. I'm a Disney Plus subscriber. I have Netflix. With Disney Plus, you get Hulu and all this kind of stuff. And then, my parents, like a lot of old people, do have a cable package. And that's where this money is coming from, as their ability to sell ads, through a cable subscription.
Yep.
But that's not how people are really kind of watching television a lot anymore, other than really live events. Live events are really the one outlier for how we're still consuming a lot of television, and sports are probably leading the way. Is the money going to run out? Is it going to change? do you think, like, some people are predicting that, like, college football itself is just going to have to break off from the rest of college athletics, and sort of be its own thing there for a while?
Yeah, I think, and obviously, because of my employer, this is a weird thing to talk about now, but it's, I think the most interesting thing to me, and maybe it's interesting in a bad way, is that this last round of moves, you could say that adding Oregon and Washington to the Pac-12 helps Fox in this case, just like, adding OU and Texas to the SEC network inventory certainly helped ESPN on that side, even if it also hurt, like, since ESPN also has hands on the Big 12, it kind of helped and hurt, but it probably helped more. And I think what we've seen moving forward here is that, if diversification is a good thing, then having this coalescing of the power structure doesn't really help the broadcasters as much. You're going to have to pay more for fewer entities, and that's kind of a different direction. And this last round, I mean, yeah, sure, it probably helped Fox a little bit, but not a ton. Oregon and Washington are solid brands, but they're not USC and UCLA, and they're getting diminished media rights, pieces of the media rights pie because of it. It feels like the moves we saw here, and now the ACC may be saying, oh, okay, well, I guess we have to. Stanford and Cal are power brands. Guess we got to bring them in, even though they're and all these things that are going on. It's like everybody's moving at a sense of obligation now than anything like creative and real. And that's a weird place to be. And I don't know what that means moving forward. I think, I don't know. Like, it is weird for me to talk about. But I do think that, I mean, you're right. Like, the cable companies or entities like ESPN and Fox are always going to make money. They're always going to sell ads, but it's going to have to come in a different way moving forward. And I don't know if having, instead of being able to spend on a lot of rights deals for a lot of conferences, having just these two entities is really going to help anybody, really. Moving forward, especially even the schools, because you do, as things just keep going up and up and up and up, but at some point maybe they don't, and I don't know what happens then. And that's this, the doomsday scenario that we hear a lot about is, the SEC and Big Ten have gotten as big as they can, and now we got to get rid of the Missouris and Mississippi States and Vanderbilts and Northwesterns and so on, so that the bigger schools can play each other more and keep that revenue level high. And first of all, it'd be kind of interesting. You have 3-3 USC at 2-4 Florida in late October. And that doesn't really sound like a big game at all. Like, we're going to get to real hardcore NFLification if we do that. But I don't know. Like, it's nothing about the current trend is positive, whether you're looking at it from this perspective of sports or cable or whatever. And we'll see. We'll see what that means. I don't like it.
Since you're in charge over there at ESPN.
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
Maybe they just need to get better at delivering ads on ESPN Plus, because since I do watch a fair amount of content on ESPN Plus. If you're not an ESPN Plus subscriber, not talking to the people that are listening to this, I would recommend it, because as a college basketball fan, there's a lot of great college basketball on ESPN Plus.
Yep.
However, during commercial breaks, there's a third of the commercial break is a commercial, and then the rest of it is just ESPN's little jazzy. Yeah.
It is a pretty good little tune to have in the background.
So maybe that's something that they really need to kind of look into, and making sure that if ad revenue is really what's driving a lot of the financials for them, find a way to kind of deliver those ads throughout the entire stream.
Well, and I mean, I think it was Jimmy Pitaro, the head of, or was it Iger? It was one of the heads of Disney/ESPN here, talking about in the future, in a few years, having like a full ESPN offering that you could just subscribe to. And not just the Plus stuff, but everything, like a la carte kind of. There's no telling how much they'll have to charge for that. And I think that'll be very, very interesting. And just in terms of like, does that actually work? And do other companies do it too? And I don't know like clearly we've been headed in that direction for a while, but it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, and not just because of who signs my checks.
Well, yeah, I agree with that quite a bit, because as like I think about like what subscriptions, if I had to cut, could I cut? And I I think about like once Stranger Things wraps up, I could very easily dump Netflix. Like I just don't think I'm watching as much content on Netflix now that I have the things that I like being delivered on Disney Plus. And this is completely getting kind of sidetracked because we're talking about streaming, but I like, as a somebody who's cut the cord, I would look forward to some kind of way to purchase all of the ESPN basically all their channels, because right now you do need a cable subscription for that, and that does make it a little challenge. You have to like sign into mom and dad's account, and it's okay. I pay a portion of his cable bill, so whatever, it's fine. But yeah, so like this is all stuff that's going to be worked out, and I'm just kind of I'm really kind of curious like how this is going to play out. As I don't think young people are going to change the way that they view things. I think that for the most part, people are going to rely more on internet and streaming than they are for cable delivery. And so, Lord knows in this society and capitalism will figure out a way to make money on it. So just because we don't know the answers doesn't mean there aren't answers. We don't know how this all plays out. So, you cover all of college football, and you do love college football. But you are a Missouri guy at heart. An alum, a longtime site manager for the old Rock'em Nation. What about Missouri? So they're in a good spot now. Mm-hmm. Obviously they've had to make a move, multiple moves in wrestling. They seem to be in a competitive spot with softball. They're trying to find a way to be competitive in baseball. Basketball looks, in pretty solid footing at the moment with the energy that Dennis Gates seems to be bringing. And Eli Drinkwitz, at least, is good for a soundbite and recruits well. What do you think is the future for Missouri as the landscape is kind of shifting here? I'm assuming they're on solid footing, being in the SEC right now.
Right. I mean, if there comes a day where Alabama, Georgia, Florida, et cetera, finally say, you know what, we're tired of making the same amount as Vanderbilt and these others, like we're going to go make even more now. Like everything changes for tons of schools at that point. And you can't say it's unrealistic, or you can't say there's a 0% chance of that happening, but that's not necessarily my biggest concern at the moment. So in terms of what is Missouri and what are they, they're an SEC team until they are kicked out, until they are bumped to the list of everybody else for, they don't make it to the 20-team Super League or whatever it is that we're talking about for the future. And as an SEC program, again, you're richer and more miserable. That is just going to be part of the deal. It's like the Premier League right now. We're freaking out because we're going to have to buy 25 new players every year with all this money that's just burning a hole in our pocket, and we're still going to be 12th place and it's going to suck. That's kind of how the Premier League works. That's how the SEC is going to work. That's how the Big Ten is going to kind of work. And it's always been a little bit more of a volatile and sometimes more miserable environment. But that's what you signed up for. You had to make the move when it came about. And even if it means that, you go 10 something years without playing Kansas in basketball and a little bit longer to go here in football, you do it because that's what the moment called for. And you're not going to leave unless the Big Ten calls and you get, and the chancellor or whoever makes these decisions has just the right people in the ear. You're not going anywhere. You're almost certainly not going to the Big Ten. You're not going back to the Big 12. Sorry, Carrington. This is just this is the life you signed up for. And look, like Missouri's been in the Big Two in the SEC a while now. They've played Kentucky more as a conference rival in football than they did Texas Tech. Like this is, it's been a little while now. It hasn't been a 2-year experiment. They have proven that when they have their act together in football or basketball, they can do just fine. They have, there was quite a period of time there where you couldn't say they had their act together, especially in hoops. But, now that they do again, or they seem to, or they might be on their way to it, things look fine again. So you're not going to win, just like they didn't win many Big 12 titles in that regard. They're certainly not going to threaten to win an SEC title, but so be it. Or in football, sorry, basketball, probably not, but we'll see. And that's just the way it is. The life hasn't changed all that much from Big 12 days in terms of your hierarchy and whatnot. And so be it. If Eli Drinkwitz has a quarterback, they're going to have a good football team and they're going to win some games. And that's how it is.
Well, and I just sort of think like that's like an important sort of part of this is how many fan bases. I just talked to CJ Moore, the Athletic, more about kind of like the basketball side of it, and I just sort of wondered like how many fan bases are going to have to just come with the realization that you're really going to have to be okay. Like if it's a down year and you finish like 9th or 10th, like it's sometimes things are going to just work out and you're not going to be as high up the rankings. It doesn't mean it's time to overhaul your program. Because
that works. That's definitely the line of logic we all follow when our team doesn't win quite as many games as we think it will.
Right. I really think like that's the challenge. Like you were kind of mentioning like Oregon and Washington kind of being like 8-4 and all, are their fan bases going to be okay if they're going into the Big Ten and Ohio State and Michigan are still at the top of the Big Ten standings? And like if Oklahoma and Texas are coming into the SEC, look, right now it doesn't look like they're going to unseat Alabama and Georgia.
Right.
So are those fan bases going to be okay with being 4th, 5th, 6th on a regular basis?
Well, and that is the kind of the underlying thing is what I've learned just being a part of Mizzou the way I was with Rock M Nation and witnessing everything I've witnessed is basically there are two things to kind of being a fan. It's your team and it's your rivalries. And when you get rid of some of the rivalries and you have to take the time to create more, it's not like things are necessarily empty. It's just it becomes even more on you and not like you can't salvage a season by beating Kansas at the end of it. If your season stinks, it just stinks. You didn't have that. You didn't have that extra little card to play there.
We do beat our Kansas at the end of every year.
That is very true. And Arkansas keeps insisting Missouri is not a rival in that regard. But, at some point you better treat it like a rivalry game, apparently, because it seems like Missouri does. But no, I think that's what, Missouri to a certain extent has become a little more kind of just self-involved, so to speak, over the last 10 years, because you don't have that kind of bailout rivalry win to make yourself happy. That doesn't, the 2013 season was still one of the most unbelievable things that I was ever able to write about. And, they didn't play Kansas or Kansas State or anybody in that season. And it was still just an amazing experience top to bottom. It just means that you have to be, the great seasons are still great. The bad seasons might end up feeling more miserable if you don't have those specific games to lean on. And that's the same with OU. That's the same with Texas and Oregon and Washington. You can't, if Oregon does go 8-4, and again, they're a good program. They could do a lot better than that. But if they go 8-4 and they don't even get to beat Oregon State at the end of the year, it's going to feel even more hollow.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the end of the questions I had for you then. Bill, is there anything else you want to get off your chest before we cut you loose and let you get out of here? You do need to show everybody your
that's right. I haven't changed.
Long time Rock M Nation people will remember Bill's affinity for Puma. Anything else you need to get off your chest before we wrap it up?
Well, that probably covers it. I did writing what was it, 8,000 unplanned words about realignment the last 2 weekends. I certainly got a lot off my chest there. So certainly read that if you're interested. Otherwise, I think it's going to be, by the way, I mentioned if Eli Drinkwitz has a quarterback, if he has a quarterback, this should be a pretty interesting season. I'm very curious about beat Kansas, start undefeated. LSU comes to town, big game. That'd be fun for Columbia in general. So that's what I recommend.
Do you think he has a quarterback?
The positive spin is that Brady Cook was hurt for most of last year, and he had one labrum or whatever it was, and they still managed to get to 6-6. They still rallied. He still looked pretty good late in the year. So if he's healthy and therefore better, then A, you've already improved, and B, if one of the other two can actually beat a healthier, better Cook, then you're in pretty good shape. So I think that, bringing in the new coordinator helps a lot. I never really trust the whole I'll be head coach and call the plays scenario. I know some have pulled it off, but it just seems like extra work, and you might want to spread that around. So I think that was a good move, and we'll see. I can't guarantee it, but I do think the offense should be a decent amount better this year.
What would you consider be a good season for Missouri this year?
Well, it is funny because, you can look at the schedule and see a fast start very easily. I know Kansas State was quite a bit better last year, but, on paper, my SP plus, it's, Missouri's 20th or 34th, Kansas State's 23rd, and just like a 1 point favorite in that game. So if you win that one, start 5-0, like that's going to, the feeling that kind of produces, and maybe the extra recruiting boost and all that is going to be pretty awesome. But then you look at the rest of the schedule, LSU is going to be very good. At Kentucky has generally been a problem for Missouri. At Georgia, Tennessee, like it gets bumpy down the stretch, whether you started fast or not. So I think if you get momentum going and you can beat South Carolina and all this other stuff, you can at least get to 7-8 wins. But it will require a quarterback, because if you lose to Kansas State and you get blown out by LSU and you're looking at all these other games on the schedule, even like Memphis is pretty good. So there's the variance feels very high this year, and I don't want to say it's all about the quarterback, but it certainly feels that way sometimes.
Yeah, I've always felt like college football, probably more than anything, is like kind of like a week to week build. And there are some teams that they're able to kind of overcome like one or two, games early where you maybe didn't know if they could win, and then they do win those games. And then the next thing you know, like they're able to really kind of put it together and gain that confidence. And so like if Missouri is able to like find a win, an extra win in those games that maybe we didn't think otherwise, then it goes from being, okay, like this is a good season, to being like, this could be a fantastic season. Yeah. Like that's just, that middle of the schedule is always kind of like tricky. If you can kind of get past and surprise, then, who knows?
Yeah. At Kentucky, South Carolina, Florida at home, at Arkansas, those games, like looking toward those games, it feels a lot different if you're 5-0 and feeling really good, or if, you lose by 2 touchdowns to Kansas State and then you get blown out by LSU. Like, those games are hard, but they feel pretty doable if you've got a really good team and you're 5-1 or something. So, I heartily recommend starting fast and having a good quarterback. That seems like a pretty good thing to do.
Well, follow Bill on Twitter
for analysis like that.
At ESPN _ Bill C. Do not follow at ESPN Bill C. It is not the official Bill C. Twitter account. But
if you want to get weird, that is my Blue Sky handle, because Blue Sky didn't let me put in an underscore. And so,
are you on Blue Sky?
I am. I am, and I'm not. I signed up and I posted like 3 times, and then I can only handle one social media thing at a time, and so it's just sitting there waiting.
I feel like that's the Blue Sky experience, just personified right there. Is you signed up and you got 3 posts.
Yep, posted a couple times, waited for everybody else to join you, and realized nobody was going to, and went back to Twitter.
Hey, Podcat over there is like single-handedly holding down college sports talk.
Oh yeah. No, God bless the people who are over there. I have gotten so intertwined with Twitter in terms of the lists I've created, the way I keep up with Mizzou stuff or soccer stuff or tennis stuff or whatever, until all those people go somewhere else. It's going to be real hard for me to leave.
Yeah. Yes. Where is Spencer Hall? And that's
even he seemed to like he was posting for a little while. Jason Kirk, some of the old SBNers, like it had momentum for like 10 minutes, and then the whole slow growth thing kind of backfired on them a little bit. And then better
Bill,
than
thanks for your
now.
time. Always good to talk to you. Always good to catch up. Hope things are going well for you in Columbia. And maybe we'll do this again when everything realigns next year.
I think that seems to be a constant. Yes.
All right. Thanks for your time, Bill. So I'd like to thank Bill Connelly at ESPN_Bill C on Twitter, at ESPN Bill C on Blue Sky. If you're on Blue Sky. You can find all of his writing over on ESPN.com. Without any real skin in the game, I think Bill's one of the best college football writers around. So also happened to be a guy that I like personally. So so go read his stuff. Go to ESPN. The SP Plus stuff is up and ready to go. Really good takes on Missouri, its place in realignment, what the new Big 12, Pac-12, and Big 10 are all going to look like. And it's going to be really interesting. So thanks for everybody for tuning in. We'll be back with another episode of Dive Cuts with me and Matt Harris, probably late in the weekend or early next week, talking about the Peyton Marshall commitment announcement, which is this Friday. So without any further ado, thank you, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning into Rock M Radio, a proud partner of Fans First Sports Network. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to see more just like it beamed directly into your personal device, just click the subscribe button below. And you can find this podcast through the Apple Podcast app or for iPhone, the Google Podcast app for Android, or whatever app you use to listen to your podcast. We are also available on Spotify. Just search for Rock M Radio. And if you like other sports, Fans First Sports Network is a podcast network that has coverage of all other teams, Major League Baseball, MLS, NFL, whatever you want to listen and read about. It is a great network full of really fantastic podcasts. So look them up and subscribe to any and all of those podcasts. Rock M Radio will be back with more episodes coming soon. Thanks.